It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and text for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
The Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and only podcast. My name is Jared.
My name is Matt.
Oh, I'm Mike.
He's on that.
He's still getting dressed.
What's up, everybody? How's everyone doing?
Hey, how's
today?
it going? Hey, wait, I have something to show our viewers.
Oh, what do you got? There it is. Oh, that's so cool.
Conan #1.
Spoke about that last podcast. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Wait, hold it up again. Let me see it again. Oh, that's great. So tell me about how good of a condition is it in? It looks like it's pretty good.
Well, I'll take it out here
You're
and show
touching it with your
everyone.
fingers.
It's okay.
I want to see
mean-
the ad on the back. That's the best thing about old comics.
Oh, that looks great.
Is that to sell cards? There you go.
Hey, it's
That-
keyed. I'm keying through it
Is
there.
that how you get free monkeys?
Yeah, I
Nah.
think so.
That's how you make money selling gift cards to the
No, that's
neighborhood.
pretty cool.
Or
Yeah.
seeds. It's either cards or seeds. You can
Um,
sell your seed in the neighborhood.
Oh, geez.
Mm,
This is from October of 1970.
wow, that's great.
2 years before I was born.
Pretty cool. How much
So-
did you get it for?
$55. And yeah, from hanging in Comics Inc. on the wall to my grubby little hands, finally, Conan the Barbarian 1 has arrived.
I mean, that's some history for you right there. That kind of kicked a lot of it off for you.
Yeah, it did. So I'm happy to own it now.
Well done.
And I just put a bid on #2.
Real? Oh, it's gonna be
There's a sickness.
now.
There's a sickness happening,
Sickness is-
but
so-
it's substantially less money, like $10.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know what's interesting about Conan, like as a character? Conan was always up for war. He was always up for a fight. Never walked away
And-
from a fight.
Who was the guy who wrote the Conan books back in the day? Who
What was his
created the
name?
character?
It wasn't Robert Jordan, was it?
No.
He wrote some.
Who created Conan the Barbarian?
There was only some way to find out.
Uh,
Conan the Barbarian was created by Robert E. Howard.
Robert E.
There you
Howard.
go.
Ah,
Robert E. Howard.
And-
Robert.
I remember hearing stories about how he would feverishly be writing these books because apparently he had some sort of psychiatric condition. And he would believe that Conan was standing behind him with an axe,
Oh, I've heard
Forcing
that weird
him-
stuff before.
forcing him to finish the books, which makes it all the more
I've heard
awesome.
that. Yeah, that's funny you say that. That's really old school news.
Yeah.
That's weird. That's great. Well, they're kind of weird books, but I'm like I said, I want to read all of them too, but I don't think I have the
Oh.
patience to acquire them like you do.
Well, no, I'm probably not going to get the whole run because that's substantial investment.
Yeah, but there has to be like a golden age of Conan, like when it was like at its best before it just kind of got like washed and kind of like thinned out a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was very popular, of course, when they were doing the movie.
Right.
But
Very cool.
anyway, so this week we thought we'd talk about something because we've just passed Memorial Day,
Mhm.
as it is recorded in the old calendar.
Right.
And trust us, folks, it means something entirely different in the future.
Oh yeah, it does.
It's not for young ears.
Yeah, we shouldn't
Okay.
talk about it.
So we thought we'd talk about some of our favorite war movies.
Yeah.
And because we are all somewhat aficionados,
War movies. I thought we were doing romantic comedies.
sometimes
it's-
those
it's
could be considered
tomato,
war
tomato,
movies.
right?
I am ill prepared, to say the least.
Well, me and Adam, Me and Adam.
Adam.
I don't know who Adam is, but me and Matt will talk about war movies, and you could just throw in with Sleepless in Seattle every once in a while.
Hit beaches
I guess.
up, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Bridget Jones' Diary.
Anyways, so yeah, we thought we'd talk a little bit about our favorite war films. So, without further delay, gentlemen, I will see you on the beach. I wonder, do we talk about the 800-pound gorilla right away?
No.
Well,
Save it. Let's get obscure.
Do
Throw
we
out some obscure ones.
save?
Well, first of all, I think we should point out the relevance of the war movie to American culture. Like the Western, I think it's a part of our mythology.
Yep, I agree with that.
Because a lot of war movies is just basically a backdrop for like an adventure, and I'm sure the one movie we'll be discussing is a classic example of that. And
Sure.
I think like the Western, we grew up watching the war movies. Like my dad, the very first war movie I was exposed to was something my dad was watching on TV. And anyway, I just want to point that out, that the war movies, like the Western, are very, very important to our culture.
What was the first war movie you saw?
It was In Harm's Way, starring John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, and Burgess Meredith. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but I
saw it years ago.
It's a Pacific war movie, and it's really good. In fact, it's one I was going to talk about anyway. So, what a segue!
Talk about it. I don't really remember it, so why don't you just refresh your memories?
It's fictional. It's not a based on a real event, but I mean it's really good. It's about the movie ends with a battle between the Americans and the Japanese, a ship battle, and you can tell the ships are models in some of the shots. But having said that, the drama is, I mean, when I saw it as a kid, you buy that stuff,
Sure.
like the stop motion dinosaurs looked real. I mean, this stuff looked real. But I also remember this movie had a very violent scene in it that to this day, I think kind of really, I watched it a few years ago, and it holds up. I mean, it's just as good. Well, it's even better now that I'm older and I understand it more. But there's this great scene where Kirk Douglas, that's basically sacrificing himself. He's taken a plane and he's flying over this Japanese fleet, and he's reporting the size of the fleet back to John Wayne and Burgess Meredith and whoever else is in there. And they start to shoot at him, and there's this really gruesome scene where you see him in the cockpit, and you see these bullet holes appear in front of his face, and then he just kind of goes slump, and like blood comes out of his mouth. And man, that is shocking. And this was on TV, but so I think that was like the first like death I remember seeing on TV where I was just really just kind of like that was horrible. But aside from that, I mean, it's a great story. It's a great ending. I think it's just, for me personally, it's like the first war movie I remember watching, and it was like really impactful.
Yeah.
And I think it was, and like I said, I watched it recently, and I think that was the movie. John Wayne had cancer. He didn't know he had cancer. He was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, he lived years after that movie was made, but I mean, that was when he got his diagnosis from filming the epic.
I mean, the man was a legend.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah. Very well cast in that.
Anyway, if you guys haven't watched it, or if it's been a while,
I've never seen it.
I'd watch it again.
It's a great movie, especially the end with the battle, considering what they had at that point. I mean, they had the smaller boats. Like John Wayne's son was on like one of the smaller boats. It's really tense. It's really good.
It's interesting. I'm trying to think back to I have a real fascination with World War II in general. I just, the older I got, the more the more, I like to read about it. I like to watch anything on the History Channel, any documentaries on World War II. I just soak it up. And I think it really stems back to, believe it or not, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indy battling the Nazis. Because when I was a young kid, I had no grasp of who the Nazis really were. They were just the bad guys in the movie. But they were like kind of like the first like real life bad guys, not like what was in Star Wars that were like, out in space. These were like here that really existed. And the Nazis became those kind of, real true bad guys for me. I think that's really the genesis of like my World War II passion. And I think almost everything that I can think of on my list is around World War II.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some great Vietnam movies and stuff, but it's not my forte. My dad even fought in Vietnam. I shouldn't say that, but World War II is like really what fascinates me. And I'm going to throw one out there. I know you guys have seen it, and I hope you've watched it in German. And that's Wolfgang Peterson's Das Boot.
I saw it years ago.
Yeah, you ever watched Das Boot? Man,
I think me and Mike watched it together, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
If you haven't watched like Das Boot before, if it's like new to you guys at home, I highly recommend it. And you have to watch it with the subtitles on. And even though I know there's some people out there like, oh, I don't do subtitles, I can't read them, I get lost in the movie, it's worth it, because to hear it in German puts you so much more in the movie than hearing the English version. And it's actually interesting because Jürgen Prochnow, who's the lead, the captain of the boat, is actually the person who does the English translation on the English version too. So it's actually his same voice. Yeah, same actor. But it's it's you have to watch it in German. But that movie I thought was fantastic, and I got real fascinated with like the submarine battles in World War II. When I was a kid, I had this great game for the Commodore called
Beachhead.
No, it's called Silent Service, and it was like you were a U.S. Sub hunter, and you were a sub going through like the different missions, and they're based on real missions. This is back in the 19...
Do you like look at a radar screen in that movie or in that?
Yeah,
game?
I mean there was like Godot, and there was
that.
Silent Service, and like, man, I played that for hours. So I was always fascinated with the submarines. But Das Boot was a great war movie, and it's like it's not like you find yourself rooting for the bad guys, the Germans in it, but like it really takes you into the claustrophobia of what those people went through in that situation, like those old World War II subs, and how dirty they were, and how hot and sweaty and gross, and like how tight the quarters were, and how it was just a crazy time, but fascinating time. Das Boot is just spectacular.
Did you know that sub is the same sub they used in Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yes. Yeah.
And they damaged it when they were shooting.
That's right.
Wow.
There's like two versions, right? There's the theatrical and the television.
Like the TV version is
longer. It was a TV movie. It was a TV movie. They turned into theatrical.
What's funny about that Raiders of the Lost Ark when he gets on the sub? I always wondered, because when you watch the map of where that sub goes, it goes pretty far. And I'm thinking, did he ride on top of the sub the entire way? Did they never submerge?
I have read the novelization, man.
You should answer this question.
It actually talks about that. In the novelization, he did lose his hat, which is a big no-no for Indiana Jones, going forward. But
he lost it,
He lost it at sea, and he hooked his whip, but the sub never submerged. It was at I guess whatever, cruising on the surface. And it talked about how he would recite all the phone numbers that he remembered to keep himself conscious.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I don't know why I remember that, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's how he lived.
I mean, I guess that's kind of canon. Didn't really lose his hat, but
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's true, because in the film you don't see him with the hat.
He doesn't have his hat. I think he leaves it on the ship.
You would.
Sure. I mean, he's not going to jump in the sea and swim to a sub with his hat on. But yeah, okay. Das Boot.
Throw me a good one here, Jared. What do you got?
We're going to talk about a lot about World War II tonight. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go back in time.
Well, can I slip one in? And we don't just...
I haven't even talked yet.
Well, I just want to slip one in real quick. We don't have to go deep into it. But,
sure, Mike. Go ahead.
U-571's another great submarine movie.
I've never seen that movie.
It's another fictional tale, but it's that same kind of claustrophobic.
It has John Bon Jovi in it.
It does, but I think they try to paint the realism, and it's also got Bill Paxton.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I saw that with you in the theater.
But I watched that recently, rewatched that recently, and I think it holds up. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
That's
Jared.
okay. I'm going way back in time,
Right.
and I'm going to the Civil War, and I'm going to talk about Glory.
Love Glory.
I've never seen that.
Really? You've
Yeah.
never seen
What?
Glory?
I don't know. It just passed me by. I just
Man.
never saw it.
Man,
That's
Glory
a
is
great movie.
it's so good. And it's actually, it's strange. It seems like the Civil War is almost like this untapped um thing for, I mean, there are stories like Dances with Wolves and stuff that happen, sort of
Around it.
around the Civil
Yeah.
War. But I mean, and then there was they did a movie called Gettysburg and Gods and Generals, which are a prequel and sequel to each
Gods
other.
and Generals wasn't that bad.
Those
Tedious, long.
I found those very dry.
Long movies,
Like-
yeah.
like
good
you're
moments,
watching-
but hard to watch.
Yes, like you're listening to a boring teacher tell you about
Yeah.
this stuff. But Glory is like great. I mean, it's got the music score by James Horner is like one of his best.
Yeah, it's really
and
good.
it actually doesn't really reference himself that much in the score. So it's really good. And like Matthew Broderick and Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman and what's his name? Princess Bride guy.
Oh,
Carrie
Carrie
Ells.
Ells.
Yes, they're all in it, and it's just I actually saw this movie for the first time in as a freshman in high school, and we watched it in high school, and it's just a great movie, and it pulls no punches as far as the violence, and you see the brutality
Mhm.
of the warfare back then, like just how almost to us how silly it looks, just walking in a straight line like into fire
Yeah.
and kind of waiting your turn to shoot. I mean, it's crazy, but Glory is a great movie.
Yeah, I agree, man. Glory is fantastic. I haven't seen Glory in a long time. I actually convinced my my father-in-law, who had never seen it. He's a big Denzel fan. I'm like, you've never seen Glory? He's like, no, I've never seen it. I'm like, you have to watch Glory if you're a Denzel fan. It's
Yeah.
like, I mean, he won he did win the Oscar for it, didn't he?
Yes.
I mean, it's like, it's a great performance. It's one of his first performances too, which makes it even
Yeah,
better.
he comes out and he's this escaped slave from Tennessee, and he is just all like mouthing off to everybody. He hates everyone.
Don't want to give it away to anybody who hasn't seen it, especially Mike, because normally we'd use spoilers on this, but I have to tell you, this one we shouldn't spoil because it's that good of a movie, and it has as Jared said, the music is fantastic, the acting is superb, the story is top notch, the cinematography is just outstanding. It earned every single accolade it got in spades, and you got to watch Glory. Glory,
Yeah.
You're right. That's a big one.
Yeah, and one of the few like Civil War movies really out there.
You're right. I mean, Glory's got it. Glory's got, that's a tough bar they set for a Civil War movie to beat.
Yeah, and there's an excellent, I would say, is kind of a follow-up also in the same era. I don't know if you guys ever saw Spielberg's Lincoln,
No, I never saw
but
it.
that is just a fascinating look,
Mhm.
sort of at the behind the scenes politics of the Civil War. And Daniel Day-Lewis, it is like you are watching freaking Abraham Lincoln.
He's the best. Daniel Day-Lewis.
I can't. I mean, you feel like you're spending time with Abraham Lincoln, and it's just amazing. So also that's maybe something you watch after Glory, but it's the Civil War, I think, is there's a lot of stories there that could be told fantastically on the big screen, but there's just not a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're right. Glory's a big one though. Glory's huge. It should definitely be on this list that we're talking about. Mike,
all
what do you
right.
think? What else comes to mind, Mike?
Well, I'm gonna jump way ahead in the future.
Go for it.
13 Hours.
Which one is 13 Hours? Why don't I know
When
that?
Michael Bay directed about Benghazi.
Never saw it.
Never saw it.
Never saw it.
No,
Oh my
man,
gosh.
I'm 0 for 2 on your list, man.
Well, it's like it. I don't know. It didn't get very good reviews for whatever reason, but it is. I read the book first, and it's got John Krasinski.
Yeah.
What's his James Dale Badge? Is that his name? He's been in a bunch of stuff, but anyway, it's also got Roy from The Office, which is kind of funny. But anyway, the it's one of those. I read the book first, and the book was written by one of the guys who was there when it happened. And the movie is like a perfect blueprint of what happened. And the sets were so much like the place that it really happened, that when they had a couple guys who were there come visit the set, and they said they were looking around like, I feel like I'm here.
You gotta tell me the plot, because I don't know what happened.
The Benghazi, when the
I got you.
American
embassy. yeah. I know
fell
the
under
movie.
siege.
I know the movie you're talking about now, right?
Yeah, and it was 13
Where the
hours.
mercs, where the American mercs went in to save them.
Yeah, they had their compound, and they went to the embassy,
Right.
and then they went back to their compound, and then they basically, it's like a siege. It's a siege movie,
Right.
and it's just really good. It's really realistic. Michael Bay, he's not always great with the story. I mean, visually he's great.
Right.
He shoots a pretty picture, but he usually can't restrain himself.
Sometimes he misses the mark. Yeah.
He absolutely nailed it. I mean, I think he followed the story about as close as he possibly could.
I feel that when Michael Bay gets a story with real heart to it, he gets it right. It's when it's too thin of a plot and too thin of a story that
he can't contain himself. He can't hold back. And it's really great. And just like you feel like you're there when it happens. And Krasinski is terrific. I mean, he's really kind of I think he's really broke out of the Jim character.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I haven't watched Jack Ryan, but I hear that's a great show.
Also, adding 40 pounds of muscle will really change your perspective on Jim.
It's really good. I think they do a pretty good job of not politicizing it, because it's a very hotly politicized event, and I think that's why some people didn't watch it. But I think they do their best to make it like this is what happened, and they don't dive too much into that stuff. So it's I mean, I don't know if it's like a true war movie, but it feels like one when you watch it. And I really, really like that movie a lot. And the book's great too.
It's a tough time. That's a tough time for the U.S. anyway in that part of the world. It's been going on a long time.
Shows you how scary. I mean, it's one of those movies that just shows you how scary that when you're in it, when you're in what's going on, it's like really, really scary.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Guys, I'm gonna throw a question out there and see. I want to see if this movie qualifies. I think it does, but I want to get your opinion. How do you feel about The Hunt for Red October? War movie or not war movie?
I've only seen it one time.
Not opinion on. Do you think is it on this list or not?
I don't. Movie. I mean, it's not really in a war. Do they fight anyone in it? I can't even remember.
Well, maybe it's a military movie.
I think that's probably
okay. Fine. Then I'm not going to talk about it. That's I needed the clarification. All right, I'm going to throw in a fictional World War II movie.
Okay.
I think this is one of the more entertaining war movies I've watched, and I really think it's fantastic. And it's Inglourious Bastards.
Oh,
I think Inglourious Bastards is.
I love that movie.
It was on my list.
Good, was it? It's so good.
Yeah,
it's a fantasy war movie for sure.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's Tarantino. This is what started his alternate history fascination.
Yeah,
it continued into his Hollywood movie.
Right.
But yeah, it's I just remember the first 10 minutes of that film is like will make you pee in your pants. It is just like
that was my introduction.
That put him on the map.
Yeah. That was my introduction. I had never seen him before.
DiCaprio was originally supposed to play that role and he wasn't available.
Oh man.
Well, it would not have been the same.
Hans Landa as
I mean, he's
just-
like one of those evil character that likes being evil. There's no ambiguity. He just likes being that way.
I remember, I mean, the beginning of that movie aside, when he's sitting in the cafe or in the restaurant with
The girl.
Shoshana, and he's just kind of like having his conversation. Man, it is like your skin is crawling in that scene. Like any
Yeah.
scene that he's in
Yeah.
is phenomenal. I know people will talk about Brad Pitt's part in that movie, and it was great.
Mhm.
And
I'll know Rain.
the Inglourious Bastards are fantastic, you know, doing what they do. But like Hans Landa in that movie is just such an evil dude, and he makes that movie for me. But that is such a fun war movie to watch, and it's you know, it's a tough one. There's some tough moments in that movie, but a good one.
Yeah, but it is interesting. I think the whole alternate history thing
Mhm.
is a very fascinating way to tell a story with that
Yeah.
backdrop. But
Yeah.
you're not constrained by actual historical events.
Right.
Well, I think what makes it work, like a alternate history, is sort of like that. You kind of wish that's what had happened.
Right. It's like a
Yeah.
wish fulfillment kind of.
It's more satisfying. And I think it's very interesting that Tarantino was like, you know what? This is how I wanted it to be, so I'm going to make a movie about that.
But also had Fassbender before he took off.
Yeah,
Oh,
Michael
what a
Fassbender was
great
in that.
scene. Yeah, he was in the bar scene.
Mike Myers is in it as.
Yes, he is.
It was great.
I mean, it's like I'm not like a Tarantino zealot by any means.
No,
but
of course not.
that movie and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are just, I mean, two movies that I just really like.
I think Tarantino's had more hits than misses. This one being a home run, and
I think he feels satisfied when it's over. You know,
such a
Yeah.
good movie. But
Yeah.
Inglourious Bastards. It's on the list.
Is it
What do you
my
got?
turn now?
Yeah, your turn.
Hang on, I got my list here. Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about a movie that's it's pretty crazy, perhaps controversial.
Kelly's Heroes.
No. Apocalypse Now.
Oh, I was going to mention that one.
Okay, good. So we could knock out a couple here. That movie, the first time I watched it, I think it was 18,
Mhm.
and I had rented it, and I knew about the history. Like George Lucas was going to make it.
I saw Hearts of Darkness before I saw the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, listen. Francis Ford Coppola is a freak. Okay, I mean, he's very talented, but watching him like lose his mind in that documentary about making this movie, it was like watching this a car crash in slow motion. It was like, man, this is, and how, but the movie itself is, I mean, it's extremely dark, and
To say the least.
and when I watched it, it really, when I was 18, it's really, it had like, I mean, I felt weird like for days afterwards.
Oh, it's such a strange movie.
it was one of
weirder as it
those
goes on,
things.
too.
It's
Yeah.
it's madness. That movie is madness.
Yeah. And I think that was the point. Marlon Brando is a freak of nature. The stuff he's saying, and and watching him in the documentary, like they showed outtakes, like he's just like talking and they just roll in the camera and he's like, I think I just swallowed a bug. And he starts coughing and he's like, I ate a bug. And it's so weird.
I mean, that was
And-
really when he started to, like, he was already off the deep end, but like, this is like, he's committed to being on the deep end at that point.
Oh,
Is this-
yeah.
Before or after Superman?
I
Before
think
Superman.
Apocalypse Now was 1980.
Oh, then
So it was after.
before-
Was
Wow.
after Superman.
Yeah. But right there, like,
because he seemed to still have it together. on
Well,
Superman.
he read, he had cue cards for Superman. He read,
But he did it. He pulled it off. I mean, you can say what you can about
Like-
whether that's lazy or not.
Like,
I mean,
he had it on the
it-
diaper, his
Yeah.
cues.
he
You
was
know, in
amazing. He
Superman.
was amazing in Superman, and he was just reading cue cards.
I know, like he refused to read his lines. He'd just show up and like he would not do the scene unless his line was there, and it's just like, okay. That's what we saw that clip of Christopher Reeve saying,
Right.
"I don't worship at the altar of Marlon Brando,"
Yeah.
which is really interesting. But Apocalypse Now, it does have that fantastic scene with all the Huey gunships
Flight of the Valkyries playing
before CG
Yeah,
helicopters.
and
Wagner
watching
right
them
on the
try
speaker.
to coordinate that behind the scenes, because they were borrowing like a local militia's gunships,
and they got
and-
different pilots every time, every
and
day.
they would get called away because there was actual unrest in the
Oh,
country.
no, really?
And Francis Ford Coppola's like losing his mind, going, "No!"
It's amazing that they got that.
I mean, those are all real helicopters up there. I mean, today, if this
Yeah.
movie was made, there wouldn't be a single real one in the air. It'd all be
No.
CG and highly, computerized controlled. But to coordinate that, you're right, in a third world country with, Mavericks flying it.
Yeah,
Crazy stuff.
it
crazy.
was a miracle that it got made.
That movie got
But-
so weird as it went on too. I mean, like the longer,
did.
the more you watch, the weirder it gets.
Have you seen there's like 3 versions of it. I haven't seen the latest. I saw the redo,
The
the
Redux.
Redux, and I
Yeah.
liked it better actually.
Well, it's I have to be in a very specific mood to watch.
Oh
that.
yeah, it's not a hey guys, it's like a
Yeah, it's not. It's like
and then we'll
2000
watch Schindler's List.
It's like 2001. I have to be like, hey, yeah, okay, I'm in the mood to watch something like this. I can't
Yep.
just like on a Saturday afternoon. Hey, honey, let's watch Apocalypse Now.
Well, I tell you what, the difference, the big difference in the two. I mean, there's a lot of added stuff in the longer cut, but when you find out what happened to the Playboy Playmates,
Wow. Okay. I actually own I own the Blu-ray that has those cuts, but not the most recent one that
I
has
don't
like
have that
the
one.
final cut. But it's an interesting movie. I think, I think Francis Ford Coppola definitely peaked in the 70s. But
that's another movie where I talk about like it's a fantasy, it's an adventure told on the Vietnam backdrop.
Yes.
It's not it's a like you said, it's a fictional story. It uses the Vietnam setting to tell because it's a story
based on Hearts of Darkness.
which was during
That was set into like the 20s.
like when the colonization stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
I got to jump my
Like,
turn here,
before
guys.
that.
Since we're talking about Vietnam, I think we should talk about one of the probably most watched Vietnam movies and probably most loved. It's Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket.
I'll disagree on that one. I think Platoon's mine, but go ahead.
Platoon, I think, is a good movie, but I think it gets a little too much cred. But Full Metal Jacket, really, Full Metal Jacket's like 2 movies in one. When you watch
Yes.
it,
It's
the
two
first half and the
different
second half.
films.
Completely 2 different films. But I remember watching Full Metal Jacket as a kid, and my dad always got a kick out of it because my dad would watch this movie. My father was an Army Ranger in Vietnam, and he always used to get a kick out of Arlie Hermes' drill sergeant role in the first half.
Sure.
And he's like, this is how they were. And my dad actually, for a brief time in the Army, was a drill sergeant himself.
Mine was as well.
And he's like, this is just bringing back a lot of memories for him. He's like, this is like, he's laughing. My dad would laugh at all this stuff. He's like, because what he's doing, he says, you're trying not to laugh at as you're like a cadet. He says, because if you really listen to it, it becomes pretty funny how they come at you and what they're saying.
Mhm.
It's like part of the struggle is not to laugh at these people. But that's such a great first half of the movie. I'm not a bigger fan of the second half as more I am the first half in the boot camp. But the progression that you see and the degradation of the first half becomes so dark, so fast. And it's so great. It's so
Wasn't
great.
Emery brought on as a consultant?
Totally. And he was
Yep.
so
And
good. They said you have to be this.
Yeah, Kubrick said no. You got to do this.
And that's really where he got. I mean, that's really
And
where he
a
got his
career was born.
amazing.
Which would be the pinnacle would be the Green Army Man
The
in
Toy Story.
Story.
Which
Yeah.
he
The same
continued to play.
character minus the vulgarity.
He made a whole career out of playing that character.
Yeah,
But
he did. And Vincent D'onofrio.
Oh gosh, yeah, that kind of. I guess that's kind of launched him, didn't it?
Private Pile, that's an interesting, his character, you think is coming around. You think that he's becoming a great soldier. You think he's on board. And then, of course, what happens is,
He flips out.
flips out. And that, I mean, is there any darker scene than him looking up after he shoots the drill sergeant Arlie Ermy? That kind of like when he's looking at Private Joker. I mean, that crazy eyes is love it. So good. So good. But then again, that movie in the second half, which, we follow Private Joker in Vietnam, I don't think is nearly as good as the first half. Interesting, but not nearly as good.
Yeah.
That's my only Vietnam movie for this list.
That's
Well,
a good.
I don't know who's next.
You're
Am I
next, Mike. Take it.
Well,
You're
I'm gonna
leading
go. I'm gonna go Platoon.
Go
because,
Platoon.
I think the thing about I like Full Metal Jacket, but it feels a little like Apocalypse Now. It feels more of a fantasy than an actual. I mean, I say that not being in Vietnam ever in my life. But Platoon, like and that's a case like I don't like Oliver Stone as a person. I think he's seems like he's a pretty terrible guy. But man, and I think Platoon was kind of like one of the first movies that kind of like was sort of taken serious as like, this is what this was like. Because there was after that movie that there were so many Vietnam movies, and there was TV shows, So, but the thing I like about Platoon is it follows Charlie Sheen's character, and you see his character change from like this guy who's just put in the, and I think it's interesting too. He didn't even have to be there. Like, he's surrounded by guys who are like, this is all I could do. And Charlie Sheen like volunteers, which makes it all the more insane. But, just how he changes through the course of the movie, and you have the great, Barnes and Elias characters, the two, it's, and then you had it's, I don't know. I just think it's a really good movie that really sucks you in and pulls you. It's like watching like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. It pulls you in to that world. And for that 2 hours, you're there. You are in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Platoon immerses you pretty bad in that movie, in that world. It's interesting.
And just real quick, I want to say too, there's a great joke in The Naked Gun when they're dating. They're playing Happy to Be Stuck with You, and they're laughing now in the theater, and they zoom out. It's Platoon, and they're walking out of.
Yeah.
In World War II, those guys that were in the Pacific theater, and they're like, in charge of storming those islands, that was rough going, being in that kind of situation, that kind of war. But what the difference is, they had a big machine working with them, and it was a pretty well-oiled machine, the World War II machine, U.S. and the Allies pushing these guys. Even though it was a rough fight, there was a lot of logistics that really helped these guys out. You get to Vietnam, and it's kind of the same kind of fight that these guys were seeing in the Pacific back in World War II, only the machine was a lot smaller. And these guys really got left, they were hung out to dry a lot in Vietnam. And
well, I think there wasn't a clear, when you fought the Japanese, you had a clear bad guy. Well, when you look at the politics between North and South Vietnam, the leaders of South Vietnam were not.
Well, forget the politics of North and South Vietnam. Vietnam itself was a political.
It was a civil war,
it's a political war that the United States was involved in themselves, and they never really committed. In fact, I don't think it's really the Vietnam War. I think it was still the Vietnam conflict, because I don't think they ever officially declared it a war.
No, it was always a police action.
It was so these guys in Vietnam really, talking to my father about it now, and my dad does like to open up a little more about it now in his older age than he did when I was younger. These guys for a lot of times were put out there with very little resources, with long actions to get out in the nasty jungle, and they were out there fighting against some pretty crazy odds, and they weren't really trained for this kind of fight. They always say that you fight a war 25 years in the past, because the people that are teaching you to fight are teaching you from tactics that are older than they are.
From the last war.
Exactly. So these guys going to Vietnam really, they didn't know how to fight a guerrilla warfare. They didn't know how to match it. So you put these young guys out there, and man, it was tough. And Platoon really did a good job capturing that kind of struggle these guys are going through. So I get it. It's not my favorite movie, but Platoon it's a tough one. It's a good one.
Yeah, that's interesting. You say that about your dad, because my dad doesn't really want to talk about that, and I don't push him to do so. And he sure as hell isn't watching movies about it. I
My
mean,
dad's, you know what it is? I think my dad's older age. He spends time at the VFW now a lot down the street. And, there's a lot of, like a lot of old guys like him that from
They're
that
just
era that just chat it up.
Old war dogs.
Old war dogs is talking it up.
Yeah.
And
I did talk before my grandpa Toxtine passed away. I did talk to him a little bit because he was World War II, obviously. And my grandpa Hannah passed away in 87. So I was 12, and I didn't
have a chance.
I didn't really care that much, quite frankly, as a 12-year-old, but yeah, talking to my grandpa was interesting because this was post Private Ryan, and everybody, there was a lot of the veterans were talking, they're opening up because that movie really brought up a lot of stuff. And, talking to him, he was the last class of horseback cavalry in the U.S. Army.
Exactly. There you go. Perfect example.
And he was like really proud of that because, he grew up on a farm, and he always kind of liked the cowboy thing, and he loved horses.
Sure.
And so
that's what Patton led. Patton was part of the horse cavalry.
Yeah. My grandfather was at the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, wow.
And so, and I didn't find that. I found that out from my dad, not from my grandpa. But, he did, before he died, talk a little bit more about it. But, it's so hard. You don't want to like, hey, tell me, even though you want to know more, you tread lightly. At least I did. So, maybe one day my dad will start talking more about it. But, in the meantime,
my dad missed it because of his ears.
Is he older?
No, he has bad ears.
Oh, I thought you said his years.
No, years. Sorry.
Oh,
he has bad ears. My uncle signed up. He joined the Marines because he wanted to go to Vietnam, and they never shipped him over, and he was killed in a car wreck.
Oh, it's crazy. Whoa. Yeah, my dad actually, when he graduated college, volunteered for Vietnam. He didn't get drafted. He volunteered.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. We'll move on in a second. But, my dad, speaking of like the drafts and all that stuff, my dad was funny. He's like, you hear stories of like people trying to like dodge the draft, or like they do like insanely crazy things to like when they get into boot camp to like get kicked out. They do everything they can. And he said, there was one thing that if you did this, you were guaranteed to be kicked out of boot camp with an honorable discharge, not dishonorable. I'm like, what is that? He's like, if they caught you sleepwalking, you were out immediately back then. He said, because if you were sleepwalking, you are
that makes sense.
A major hazard to your company that you're in.
Yeah.
And he said, nobody would clue in on this. He said, every now and then someone would legitimately be a sleepwalker and they'd be out right away. He said, but all you had to do was just get up and start walking around. He said, walk around, and when people are talking to you, just ignore them at night. And they would be like, he's a sleepwalker, and he'd be out. So sleepwalking. Watch the draft. Be a sleepwalker.
Wow. That's interesting.
There you go. Who's up? Jared, you, me?
I think I am.
Knock it out.
Well, I'm going to talk about something that you just reminded me of, Matt, when you said, guys in Vietnam, some people were trying to get, that was a lot of draft dodgers, people moving to Canada and stuff like that.
I tell you what, I would like to think of myself patriotic, but man, if I'd heard some of that stuff that was coming out of Vietnam, I don't know if I would.
well,
I mean, I think when that first started, they were lining up because, let's do this. And then once the reality of it hit.
Well, it reminded me of, and what I'm going to talk about now is kind of, I guess, a lead up to what we'll talk about later, but I don't think you can have this list without Band of Brothers of the Pacific on it.
I was going to mention Band of Brothers at the end.
Well,
It has to be mentioned as an honorable mention on this.
in Band of Brothers, they interviewed, and they did this in the Pacific as well. They interviewed the actual veterans, and they would talk about if a guy was 4F, he would kill him. They would sometimes just kill themselves. Like if they were denied entry into the military, then they would kill themselves.
Right.
Which is, I mean, it was definitely a different era, a different time. But I think, especially in the 40s at that time, the patriotism was very strong. And, Band of Brothers it came out a few years after Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, it's of course not a movie, but definitely I think a landmark for like war films.
Oh, unbelievable. Unbelievable to watch that whole series. I think Band of Brothers better than the Pacific. I think the Pacific was okay, had great moments, but I don't think it was nearly as good as Band of Brothers. But Band of Brothers, unbelievable. It should be mandatory watching for everybody. Every American should have to watch Band of Brothers. I just think it's just an amazing capture of American history that they got right. Like they told it the way it happened,
Well, I'll tell my story about when I watched the Pacific because I got the box set on Blu-ray and I was home from work because I had shingles on my face, and my my oldest was newborn, and I was not allowed to go near him because basically it's chicken pox.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what shingles are. It's chicken pox.
Yes.
And you can't, you can spread it to an infant, and that could be bad news. So I was home, and I watched that entire. I think it was 12 episodes. Is that how
I
many?
think it's 10.
Something
They've
like
all
that,
been 10.
Okay, so I watched 5 episodes one day, and I watched 5 episodes the next day. And man, I'll tell you what, that pulled a number on my psyche, because if you watch the Pacific, that there is nothing cheerful about that.
No.
war.
Well, probably if you also have shingles, you could probably.
The Pacific was a grueling, nightmarish hellscape of death.
Yeah.
And that, I think the Pacific, with some odd scenes in it that.
Wait,
Jared
you're going to
and
talk about the sex scene.
I
knew
wasn't
as
going to.
soon
I
as-
wasn't going to mention it.
I knew as soon as I mentioned Pacific, you'd be like, "Yeah, it was great, except for the sex scene."
I mean, that was so like, what the hell is going on? But anyway, so it's like, especially because the way the Pacific functions, that makes it really effective, I think, is it just gets worse and worse and worse. And by the time they're at the end of that war, I mean, it's just like everyone is just like zombies. The whole
they're
everyone's
just worn out.
There's filthy. And Jared, I don't know if Jared sent it to me or if I bought it. One of the books that it's based on.
The one by
with
Eugene
the old
Sledge.
breed. With the old breed.
Eugene Sledge.
I think we all read that at the same time.
Yeah.
That has to be read. That is a fantastic book. But
Makes me not ever want to visit Okinawa.
it makes me thank God that I was not alive during that war and was not
Just think,
sent to
if your ticket was called
to
to
the
go
Pacific.
to like Europe or the Pacific,
take the
probably would've-
Nazis
you
any
probably
day
would've-
of the
yeah,
week.
you probably would have been thinking like, "Oh man,
That's
I'll go to the Pacific.
That's
That's a
it.
much
And
better
I-
thing than." Oh,
I remember talking to Matt when the Pacific was airing, and I said, at least with the Germans, they are an Eastern civilization. They take prisoners. They feed you. That you can talk. You can have a cigarette with a German soldier.
there was a cord that was given.
Yes, but when you were talking about the Japanese army,
At that time,
yes, at that time, it was truly for Americans of that era like an alien culture, complete. Like neither side understood anything about the other, and it was all distortion from both sides. And there's a great scene. John Basilone, who is a complete badass hero, who won the Medal of Honor and then went back and got killed on Iwo Jima.
Right.
He, there's a scene in the Pacific where, all the new kids are like, yeah. And,
Sorry.
that's okay. And they're like, he goes, what do you want to do, Private? And he goes, I want to slap a Jap. You can beep that if you want. He goes, I'm ready to slap a Jap. And he goes, oh yeah, is that what you want to do? And then he tears into them. He's like, listen, you have no idea what you are getting into. The Japanese soldier that you're going to be fighting is like basically telling them that they're not pussies like you are. They don't care. They have, they have a totally different mindset, and they want to eat your guts for breakfast. And it's just a great scene. And I've revisited the Pacific recently, and it's excellent. Both of those Blu-ray sets are so packed with documentaries and interviews and like interactive maps. There's even commentaries on those discs of, you can watch the movie with some of the soldiers who are being portrayed like old men who are watching this going, well, I remember this day. And I remember, like, the John Basilone episode has commentary from one of the guys who saw him die. And they're just, it should be, it's like after you watch all that stuff, it's like going to college for World War II. So much information. I mean, they're just excellent. So
what's interesting about when Saving Private Ryan came out and those shows, and then of course once again you started having all these World War II movies being made. The thing that growing up, you kind of like, World War II was sort of, I think Peter Jackson kind of described it. He said he described it as the last good war. And the movies that were big, that, like when they were being made in the black and white World War II movies, the war and the shows, there was shows like McHale's Navy and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The war was very clean. So that's how when you grew up, you kind of imagined that war was just like a clean war. Mm-hmm. And then when that stuff came out, and then, like we started reading the books about it, and you just realized those wars were nightmares. They were not fun wars. I mean, they were brutal. I mean, the Germans, aside from not being as bad as the Japanese, were still killing Americans. They wanted to like, that was that's the goal of a war. I never understood, while we have rules in war, how do you have rules in war when it's the whole, you're just wanting to kill the other side. You want to kill the more of them. But that was real eye openers with those type of things.
And I think the episode with Band of Brothers where they discover the concentration camps.
Oh yeah, that was
a
good episode.
Was so good. Like, I mean, not good, but so well done. Like, because you see on their face, they don't have any idea.
There was rumors, but it was so terrible, no one could believe it. Like, this can't be real. This can't be really happening.
And they go in there and they're like, wait a second. And then it like dawns on them like, holy crap. And Terry's grandfather was one of the soldiers who liberated one of those camps, which that's outrageous. I couldn't even imagine. But I think, not to belabor the point, but yeah, I think Band of Brothers and Pacific have to be on the list because you definitely post Saving Private Ryan movies, because like Mike said, I think after Private Ryan, there was a shift in how that war was portrayed.
Yeah.
And every World War II movie that came after sort of changed how they did battle or
Yeah.
presented battle.
That's a good point. You
And
want to talk about it? You want to get into it?
Well,
The
yeah,
big-
we're coming up on an hour. We might as well.
Big gorilla.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to Masters of the Air whenever it gets made, the B-17 story.
It'd be fantastic.
But anyway,
Oh
you know
my
what?
gosh!
You know
Real
what?
quick,
We have to mention it.
okay,
What?
wait,
mention
It has to be
what?
on. We don't have to get into it, but we should honorable mention it as well.
What's that?
Memphis Belle.
Oh,
Okay, I
That's a-
like Memphis Belle.
I grew up watching Memphis Belle. Like,
Yeah.
I saw it like it was always on cable, like over and over. And I think I might have had it on tape too.
Yeah,
But I loved Memphis Belle. And Memphis Belle, although a little lighter, a little brighter,
sure.
still had some pretty hard, dark moments in it, and some heavy moments.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it really fascinated me, the whole B-17, just, the different crew positions and
Yep.
the things they're going through. They're battling, the very cold air up there, everything, and they're being shot at, and they're in that tin can,
yeah. I was gonna say, like, a really good book that I read recently was Unbroken, the Zamperini story.
Yeah.
And they spend a good portion of that book talking about those planes. And
Yeah.
you talk about, okay, you're not going to the Pacific, but we're going to put you in these bombers. I mean, like, okay, no thanks. I'm a sleepwalker.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's-
those things, those
I'm a sleepwalker.
those planes were like just death traps on their own, aside from the fact that people were trying to shoot you down.
Yeah. And Masters of the Air is actually based on a book, and I think I'm going to try to read that before.
Is that Flyboys? Because I have that book. I
No,
haven't read
it's called Masters of the Air.
Oh, there's another one
And-
called Flyboys that I was gonna read.
So I think I'm going to try to knock that out before the miniseries.
When's that
comes
coming out? Have they shot
I think
it?
they haven't shot it yet, and
Mm.
it's going to be on Apple Plus, not on HBO. So
Those man,
So
those
that's okay.
pilots.
well, I might have to fly the high seas for that one, or subscribe to Apple Plus. I'm just admitted to pirating video here on the podcast. I don't do that. Anyway, okay, so
let's do it.
this has all led us somewhere, and I think it is of course a landmark feature. Once again, I think Steven Spielberg once again showed us something we never had seen on a movie screen before, in like terrible realism. And of course, we're talking about Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay. Saving Private Ryan. That was the one that kind of changed the game as far as,
Set the bar.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, go ahead, guys. When did you guys see it in the theater? First of all,
I remember I heard about it. I actually went on a date to see that movie.
oh wow,
And-
good date movie.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I saw that. It's really weird because the movies have gotten so much more violent now.
Yeah.
And of course, I watched some pretty hardcore violent horror movies, but I remember just like 5 minutes in that movie thinking, okay, I got it. I'm done. I'm good. I understand. It was awful.
No, you still got 20 minutes to go.
And it's just it's like that first time you see that dinosaur and you're like, oh, they got real dinosaurs to shoot this. You're like, wow. I mean, and I think, but two, I think the thing about it is it made sense. Like when you see it happening, you're like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. I mean, they're basically just shooting these. They're just trying to shoot these soldiers with these guns. Of course, that's what it's going to look like. It just sort of clicked when you saw it. I mean, it was still brutal and like shocking, but it just like, oh, men would drown because of their equipment. These guys that carry the flamethrowers, they would get hit and they would blow up everyone around them. Body parts would go flying in places. People would be on the beach, literally dying.
Mhm.
So,
Well, you said it best earlier that the concept of the clean war movies is thrown out the window on this. And what makes that whole opening sequence so powerful is that, one, you realize that this really happened. As it happened, this event, like you're seeing it, happened just like this. And as you're seeing like those heavy machine gun bullets just strafing the men in the boat, just tearing them to pieces.
As
And
soon
that's
as
why
the
as soon as it goes
door
down, they're
comes
just
down.
cutting the Swiss
yeah, because
cheese.
they're not going to wait for him to get
Yeah,
off the boat.
but
They're going
you
to shoot
see
him
it,
before
and-
they even get off the boat.
And you realize like, man, this is what these guys went through. This is like, how do you do this? How do you push forward in this kind of situation? But they did, and they do, and they get through it. And that whole beach assault in that is just insane to watch. It's insane. For the minute that movie starts to the minute they get up by the bunkers, it just you're sitting there. I mean, it's just like it's unbelievable to watch. I didn't watch in the theater. I got that one at a Blockbuster rental one day,
Man.
and I
theater
regret
was-
not seeing that in the theater.
yeah, that was definitely
Well,
a theatrical movie.
And it's it's kind of, I don't know, it's maybe a little bad, but whenever it's that scene is actually a great demo for your home theater. But,
I can imagine.
it's like,
all
hey,
that.
but I remember every time I get a new receiver or new speakers or something, I put it on,
Put
and
it on.
it's like terrible, but it's like, holy crap, this sounds
Yeah.
like amazing. Like, I remember when I first got a 5.1 surround sound. I think, Mike, this was in Nashville, and I was like, come over and listen to this, and you were just like, what? And then you bought one the next day. But
I remember your wife got mad at us for watching it because we were kind of like the way we were watching, like, oh, it's just so cool, and she got like mad.
and
'cause
she's
we were-
mad because it was like dead U.S. soldiers. And
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But
I will
Which-
say though that I when that movie came out, the trailers were impressive and whatnot. But I remember,
trailers did not prepare you for
No,
what
but-
you were
but I'll
about
tell you-
to see.
there was a time where I wasn't really on board with Tom Hanks anymore. I think I got over Tom Hanks.
well, yeah, because he was in so much throughout the '90s. You said like, I don't, after Apollo 13 and Forrest Gump.
I just
and
kind of I was over him. I was like, and I got that way like early on with Tom Cruise, and then I came back around with Tom Cruise in his career. Like when Private Ryan came out, I was kind of in that like, you know what? I just don't care about Tom Hanks enough to see this movie. But Tom Hanks pulled that off tremendously in that role.
Well, that whole
And
cast, that
great
whole
cast. Vin
Well-
Diesel in his, I think one of his first roles. You have
Yeah,
Mike
Barry
Sizemore.
Pepper.
Sizemore,
oh, he was great. Barry Pepper in that.
Yeah, the sniper.
the
So
guy who
good.
played Wade. Oh, what was his name? He has a kind of a weird name.
It was the little blonde kid.
Yeah, whew, that death
Yeah,
scene.
Even
Uh,
Tom
he's-
Sizemore was great in it.
Tom
Yeah.
Sizemore was good. My favorite part of the movie is when Tom Hanks walks up to the German soldier and like looks at him and walks by him. After he gives him the crappy brownies. No, it's yeah, the and I think
Giovanni Ribisi.
Ribisi. That's it. And it had the weirdo from Lost.
Yeah,
Um,
Faraday.
Daniel Faraday was in it.
Oh, he was up
Yeah.
him, right?
Upham.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mike, I think this could also qualify as like, because of course the D-Day sequence was based on an actual event.
No,
but
it's an adventure.
It's
After
a-
the D-Day invasion, it turns into like I used to grow up watching movies like Chasing the Argonauts and the Sinbad movies,
Sure.
where the crew would go on a mission, and along their journey, crew members would get picked off, and it would shrink. And then that's what Saving Private Ryan is. It's an adventure. They go on an adventure, and along each adventure or each part of the adventure, they lose somebody, and and it shrinks down.
And Ted Danson was in that one.
Yeah.
Briefly,
So
yeah.
and so was Paul Giovanni. What's his
That's
name?
right. Yeah,
Giamatti.
Giamatti.
Yeah.
Giamatti. A bunch of people are in this movie.
The one scene that stands
Dale
out,
Dale Davis or
Dale
what's-
Dye.
Dale Dye. He's in it.
He was in Band of Brothers as well.
Yeah.
He
And,
was one of the he was like Arlie Ermy. He was
The beginning.
he was an advisor. Dale Dye was an advisor on Private Ryan and Band of Brothers,
And Platoon was one he.
Okay, and they cast him in those things as well. But the one scene that stands out is when they get the wrong Ryan.
Yeah,
and
that's you know who that is. You know who that is?
Who's
the guy
that?
from Firefly,
Nathan Fillion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's like, what? And
does that mean my brothers are okay?
They're okay. They're okay. Oh,
it's just like
kid.
but it was a good bit of levity I think you needed in that movie. It's just like, oh man, but that's like something that would have happened, because you're looking for a needle in a haystack, and it's like, okay, well, we got the wrong Ryan.
The thing I like too. Well, I just did a Peter Brady there. The thing I liked about it is, each person because obviously they were like, well, what makes this guy so special? Why are we wasting our resources? And then then you have Ted Danson, his character, be like, he's like, you're doing a good thing here. Get him home. They get different perspectives along the journey of what they were doing. And then the next one was the people died because they put the metal flooring to protect his Jeep from being shot, and they didn't tell the pilot, and he ended up crashing the plane because of it. They killed like 22 of his men or something. It was too heavy. Yeah. And so it was kind of they were kind of like, what is it worth the price of what they were doing? But having said that, go ahead, Matt.
No, it's just that I'm just thinking that movie as a whole. What's so smart about that movie, and Band of Brothers too, I guess, could fall into this, is that they future-proofed it in how they shot it. With the wash, actually it wasn't washed. Actually, what they did for Private Ryan was they took the film and had it chemically dipped before they shot on it, so they could get that kind of
that washed kind of out
high, like that contrasting, look to it. Yeah. So that film was treated, and because of that look that you see will kind of preserve any kind of like it kind of hides a little bit of the magic that they had to use to make it look like that. Everything looks real because you can't see fake stuff in that movie. It's hidden with the wash. And Band of Brothers has that same kind of gritty kind of look to it. And it kind of, if there was ever kind of things to pick apart, it kind of gets hidden in that wash. It future proofs it in that way. Yeah. So I think these movies are going to hold up for generations to be able to watch.
Sure.
Versus
and it's good that you say that is good future proofing, because obviously CGI was used pretty liberally probably, but the way it was used doesn't draw attention to itself. Because in Band of Brothers, they're not flying 880 C-47 planes
exactly
around, but it looks great. It looks real, and that's not something I think that's going to change in the decades to come.
Right.
Well, I will say I do have a couple issues with the movie.
Okay.
The bookends. I hate the bookends.
I agree.
I think it's so heavy-handed. It doesn't fit within the context of the film.
You don't need them.
And it makes me insane, because when they're doing at the beginning, when they're doing that zoom in on that guy's face, who's ends up being Ryan, it's like he's recollecting the invasion, and he wasn't there. Well, that makes me insane, because it's such an it's like he's not there. What is he remembering?
Well, I also don't think it was fair for him to tell, for Tom Hanks's, what's Tom Hanks's character now? What's his name? I can't think of his name.
Mitchell or something like that.
It's not. I never thought it was fair for him to tell Ryan Miller to earn it.
And then at the end, when he's like,
put that guilt on him. Look, Matt Damon's character was there. Ryan was there just like everyone else. He didn't choose to be put where he was. He didn't choose to be put in a situation. He just wound up there, just like a lot of people in World War II. And for him to be told to earn this,
that's a good point.
It was unfair to give him. I didn't think it was fair. He didn't ask to be rescued, as he told him in the movie. And he was a soldier like everyone else. So for him to get that guilt trip put on him, I don't think he.
And I hate that moment they show of him. Yeah, did you fart? That moment.
They're coming to get me.
Where he's grabbing his knees and shaking in fear.
Yeah,
I thought, wow, why is he doing? He's there. That was the thing about him, is when they finally meet him, he's not a goofball. He's not like
He was effective.
He's a soldier.
Yeah.
But oh gosh, another thing I didn't like was what didn't I like? I can't remember now.
Upham in general is probably one of the.
Well, I liked him because he was sort of like the audience. You know, he's kind of this is all new to him and all this stuff. So he's kind of like the viewer. Oh yeah, I think a better opening for that movie would have been to done an explanation of the relevance and importance of that invasion. Because that's something I don't think they cover. They don't talk about how important that invasion was to the war of us finally getting on that continent.
Imagine if Upham had been the bookend. He would have made a little more sense in that movie, don't you think? Because he was in every aspect of the movie, start to finish.
I don't think that movie needs an.
I agree with you. I agree, but I'm just saying, take the Ryan character out and put Upham in there, because Upham was there the entire time, and he had a bit of an arc in it as well. And Upham might have made more sense. But that said, the death scene, which Upham allowed to happen,
yeah, that's infuriating.
Might be one of the most gruesome on-screen deaths. I mean, there's been bad on-screen deaths in movies before, but something about that death bothers me when I watch it.
It's so up close, and it's like a straight up murder. It's not like a war when you're shooting at someone and you hit someone. That's like a straight up murder.
Second when he's the knife's about to go in his ribs, and he's trying to have a conversation, like, whoa, hey, hold on,
wait,
let's talk about it. And then it's going in, you hear it scraping the bones. It's the worst. It's the worst death scene ever. Hard to watch.
But anyway, I think they should have put a little more explanation on why that, because I think a lot of people going in that movie probably didn't know that.
Well, what D-Day was, I mean,
well,
you probably shouldn't be in that movie.
You know, that's like you said, that's not the story that they're telling.
I know, but it's still pretty, it's important. And I don't have a problem either. I'm not trying.
Maybe it's
using that event as
what they were watching later. Maybe
as I still think they could have said something. But you know what? And we're talking about like how World War II is like a clean war. A good contrast is there's that exact same invasion in The Longest Day, and the movie's good. I mean,
a lot of trumpets playing.
Well, there is a shot of some Scotsmen getting off of one of the boats with the bagpipes. But if you watch that movie, and it's also got Christopher Pike in it. If you watch that scene, it's the exact same battle. Mm-hmm. Shot back then, and when characters get shot back then, there were no squibs. They just
they just fall over.
They'd grab their chest where they got shot.
There's no rivers of blood going down.
Yeah. I mean, it's still like a good movie, but it's kind of funny watching it.
Like Matt said, not future proofed.
Yeah.
No, not at all. But I mean, war movies, we could talk about all kinds of stuff, and there's some sci-fi war movies that I'd like to get into at some point, but not today. I think not today. Private Ryan should cap this one off as definitely, and even today, the bar setter for war movies. It's got everything in it. It definitely
changed the way those movies were produced.
And a word to any great filmmaker out there: future-proof your movies. Think it through before you do it. How do you make a movie, especially a movie in World War II, last forever? And I think Private Ryan and Band of Brothers has got that formula down and should be studied, as I'm sure they are. But I think that's all we got tonight, folks.
That's it.
Season 4 is rolling along.
It is. What do we got? We going to? You got a website or something, Matt?
We do have a website.
Do we sell stuff?
I don't know.
What's that you got there? Well,
hey,
wait.
You like coffee?
Yeah, look at that.
Look, I like coffee.
You know what? The podcast, being the only podcast in existence, needs a little help every now and then. If you love the podcast, first off, share the podcast. Tell people about us. You're watching us right now, maybe on YouTube, which is great. Share that too. But we're on every podcatcher. Share it out. Let other people discover who we are, because we love doing this. We've been doing this now for 2 years, and we think that this
2 years this month.
2 years this month. So we're really proud of it. We think
How do we have 4 seasons if we've been doing it for 2 years?
2 seasons a year.
2 seasons a year, buddy. But we're having a good time. But we have the hyperspace.net. Feel free to visit. There's great merch there, from t-shirts to mugs to whatever you want. We can get you.
Oh, yeah.
And
I will be starting an advice column, so be sure to.
The blog starts soon. I can't wait to read it.
Call in your personal questions. I'm here to help.
Don't ask him anything, ladies and gentlemen.
Get you through those tough times.
Mike's Corner will be available soon on the website. But thanks for listening and thanks for watching. And we'll see you next Monday.
All right.
Hyperspace.
Bye, guys.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to The Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us here next time as we take you into the 25th century.